10 million user-generated levels, 3 main console games, 2 handheld games, and 4 spin-offs. With a franchise as massive as LittleBigPlanet, there's bound to be some interesting stuff to talk about. Remnants from early development, lost media, glitches, wild theories, and obscure facts. LBP has it all. I've done some digging and even got in touch with a few people in the LBP community to make and explain the most comprehensive iceberg to exist. There's a lot of stuff here, so sit tight as I'm going to attempt to explain the LittleBigPlanet Iceberg. Glowing skeleton. This was one of the most popular glitches in LittleBigPlanet 1. Yes, it can be done in other games in the series, but it originated in the first game. In order to do it, you have to electrocute Sackboy in create mode and immediately press left and right on the D-pad. This should make your Sackboy into a glowing skeleton, which isn't a costume you can normally obtain within the game. You can, however, just save the costume and use it whenever you want. The reason this even happens is because when Sackboy is electrocuted, a glowing version of the Zombie Boy costume is auto-equipped for a few frames. So when you rewind and fast forward really fast, it freezes that specific frame, giving you a pretty cool skeleton costume. The LBP2 Boo button. If you remember, LittleBigPlanet 2 used to have both a yay button and a boo button for rating levels. It was a simple like and dislike rating system, but in one of the later updates, the boo button was completely removed. People came to the conclusion that the boo button was either making creators too discouraged, or it was just abused in some shape or form. While the boo button was removed for rating levels, you can still boo comments and reviews to this day. Orable material. The LBP games had a lot of unused materials, but the orable material is the most well known. It was a precursor to the fire hazard, and the material itself can be obtained in the final game by unofficial means. If you do manage to obtain it, it's not going to be hazardous by default like it was originally intended to be. Garden's Fallen Star. In LBP 1, 2, and even 3, you can see a fallen star object in the garden's background. It's located on the ground somewhere on the far right, and its bottom is completely cut off. Nobody really knows if this is unintentional or not. It could just be a cute little detail, but it's still interesting nonetheless, as it doesn't show up anywhere else in the background. Fix Me Hook Hat. When LBP 3 first launched, there was a placeholder text left over in the Sackbot's tweak menu for the Hook Hat power-up. The text read, "Fix Me Hook Hat." At first, it became a meme within the LBP community, but eventually, fellow community members Glitchmaster7 and Technological put this text on a shirt and sold it.
Shortly after we made the shirt and put it on Redbubble, a Sumo Digital employee came into work one day wearing it. Sumo seems to have found it pretty funny, which led to them making the Fix Me Hook Hat shirt a free DLC costume for LBP3. In fact, you can still download the shirt today and even buy the actual Fix Me Hook Hat shirt that it's based on Redbubble.
3D/infinite layer glitch. Ever since the first LittleBigPlanet game, there's been a glitch that allows people to go beyond the intended 3-layer limit. With this glitch, you were able to make objects extend past the 3rd layer, giving them more of a 3D effect. Yellowhead. This character is from LittleBigPlanet's original prototype known as Craftworld. This prototype was first shown off back in January of 2006, and over time, Yellowhead would be developed into the Sackboy we all know and love today. Media Molecule would have Yellowhead cameo in their later games, such as Tearaway, and of course, LittleBigPlanet. Not only was he an unlockable costume for acing the last level in LBP 1, but he was also a DLC costume in LBP 3 to celebrate Media Molecule's 10th anniversary. The 10th anniversary version of Yellowhead is actually a 3D model and not 2D like the original costume. Walker enemy. The Walker was an unused enemy in LBP 1, composed of 2 separate models, and was an early solution to a moving enemy. It was replaced by the creature brain and creature legs in the final game, and through certain means you can spawn the Walker model in-game, but it pretty much has no functionality left to it. Freezertron. This was going to be an additional hazard in LittleBigPlanet 1, and would have froze Sackboy in an ice block when touching an affected material or object. In order to break out of the frozen ice block, you were required to shake the PS3 controller, but this was supposedly scrapped as it caused issues with online play. I'm not entirely sure if this was the reason the Freezertron was scrapped, but there are still references to it in multiple LBP builds. While there are remnants of its code, it's too unfinished and not to mention incompatible with any of the LBP builds we have in order to work. There are still people searching though, and one day it is expected to be fully recovered. Create in pod. This is a pretty well-known glitch in the mainline LBP games. With this glitch, you can essentially put any object or gadget in your pod and interact with it. From what I know, there are many different variations of this glitch throughout LBP 1, 2, and 3, and you can do some pretty cool things with it. I believe it's been patched several times over the years, but people keep finding new ways to make it work. Although the pod glitch can be fun, it's also very dangerous as it's possible to break the pod itself, which makes the game unplayable, and the only solution is to delete your profile and start fresh. If you did back up your profile, you should be fine, and it is always recommended to back up your profile if you ever decide to do this. Paintinator Pet. I personally don't remember doing this, but the Paintinator Pet was a somewhat common thing people did with their Paintinator power-up. Simply, they put a decoration on the Paintinator itself and made a little companion to follow them around. Profile corruption. This was a major bug in the LittleBigPlanet games, but was primarily seen in the third entry. LBP 3 is notorious for being a rushed game, and at launch, there were a lot of game-breaking bugs. These game-breaking bugs often led to a profile corruption, an issue that usually can't be fixed without deleting a certain save file. There seems to be different variations to profile corruption, such as one that just affects your adventure mode progress, but it is highly recommended to always back up your profile in case just something randomly happens. Since 2014, the game has gotten a lot less glitchier with patches, but profile corruption can and will still happen at complete random. LBP 1 delay. At launch, LittleBigPlanet 1 was recalled because the song Tafa Niang, a track featured in the Savannah level, had text from the Quran in its lyrics, and it sparked a bit of controversy. Media Molecule simply cut the lyrics with a patch and kept the instrumental version in. You can find the original uncut version on YouTube, but I'm not going to play it due to copyright, among other reasons. Hidden Middle Finger. This refers to a funny little Easter egg in LittleBigPlanet 2's story mode. In Factory of a Better Tomorrow, there is a level called Pipe Dreams, and in Pipe Dreams, there is a hand with controllable fingers using levers. If you pull the third lever, and only the third lever, the middle finger will go up, but a denied sticker will quickly pop up and block it. The Wheel of Death, or the Wheel of Doom. This can refer to one of two things, actually. Firstly is the Wheel of Death glitch. This glitch is now patched, but it happened when a player grabbed a wheel attached to a motorbolt going at maximum speed. Not only does this kill you, but it prevents you from spawning or using the poppet at all. As for the second Wheel of Death, there's nothing much to say other than it being regarded as the most difficult obstacle in LBP 1. It's found in the second level of the Wilderness and has a legacy of being insanely frustrating, especially if you're trying to ace the level and playing multiplayer. LittleBigPlanet Hub was cancelled. LBP Hub was a free-to-play LittleBigPlanet game announced in 2013. Since that announcement, there hasn't been any new information or even an official cancellation. It just vanished. Most people in the community have accepted that the game was quietly cancelled, as no official statement was made by Sony themselves. Black Poppet. At first, a black poppet was originally going to be in LBP 1. In fact, the poppet was going to have an entire color wheel, but black is the only color that can still be activated in the final game. With a glitch, of course. This black poppet color was sort of brought back in LBP 3, but is a bit different compared to the solid black poppet in LBP 1. English Seaside. This is one of the more notorious cut locations from LittleBigPlanet. It was based on a beach, and it's safe to assume that this theme was cut very late into development. Some level names were left over in the final game's code, such as the Port, Out at Sea, The Depths, Pirate Ship Race, and Underwater Jetpack Score Challenge. The song Tea by the Sea was originally going to be used for the English Seaside Theme, but it was sold later on in the MM Music Pack. Ambience for this theme was left over in the final game's code, and the game script suggests that Sackboy was supposed to meet a pirate character who wanted to find his ship, the Cursed Colander. And it's also speculated that the seaside world would have taken place between the gardens and the savannah. The main reason why is because Sackboy leaves the gardens in a submarine, which would be a much better world transition for the seaside instead of the savannah like it is in the final game. While the seaside theme is very well known, most of its assets were never recovered and people always assumed they were lost to time. Until recently. Now, this is quite a big deal for the LBP community, and honestly, it caught me off guard while making this video. A few people I know just so happened to recover pretty much all of the files for English Seaside from a PS3 dev kit, and this all happened while in the process of making this video. Not only that, but they ported those assets to the retail copy of LittleBigPlanet 1, and as you can see, I am playing in English Seaside in its raw, somewhat incomplete glory. Huge shoutouts to MysteriousCube, who has already helped a ton with this video, ColinMacQ, TechnicalSock, PrinceFrizzy, and Cancerious for digging up these files, porting them to the game, and solving one of LittleBigPlanet's biggest mysteries. Sooner or later, you're going to see videos either by me, them, or other people in the community playing a fully functional English Seaside theme, Evel Knievel. There was originally going to be a costume in LittleBigPlanet 1 based off of the real-life stunt performer Evel Knievel. This costume can be seen in early pre-release footage of the game, and it was white, red, and blue, just like Evel Knievel's outfit in real life. While a similar costume made it into the final game, the color scheme was changed to more of a black and red instead of a red, white, and blue. The textures for the original Evel Knievel colors were lost for over a decade, but thanks to the files found on that same dev kit that brought us Seaside, textures for the Evel Knievel costume were finally recovered and ported back to LBP 1. LBP 3 was originally 30 layers. This traces back to the oldest pre-release footage we have of LBP 3, where much more than 16 layers can be seen. But that's not all, as in a 2013 LBP 3 alpha prototype, the player sensor, microchip, and some other logic pieces had the radius able to be set to 30 layers. Why was it cut down to just 16? Was 16 a good idea in the first place? The world may never know. Evil Avalon. There's some cut dialogue that suggests that Avalon Centrifuge was going to be a villain instead of an ally in LBP 2's story mode.
We must defeat the evil sucker forces being spearheaded by Avalon Centrifuge.
The time has come and gone for those other creators with vision and imagination. I and I alone shall control the creativity of the cosmos. We cannot but flourish under my benevolent hand. Victory shall be mine.
Apparently, Avalon himself would have controlled the Negativitron, but in the final game, Avalon is a good guy. There's also some early designs of Avalon that might resemble some aspects of him being evil, as well as some stickers in the final game that might resemble this, but the cut dialogue is honestly plenty enough evidence. LBP 1 Pod Music Morse Code. If you listen very closely to the pod music found in LittleBigPlanet 1, what seems like Morse code can be heard in the background. I've been trying to find out if there was an actual message hidden in this Morse code, but after browsing the internet for weeks, I can't find a satisfying answer. It seems like the general consensus is that it's just gibberish, but from what I know, not a lot of people actually looked into it. Jacob's Well. This was a scrapped world in LBP 3's adventure mode and featured a deer story character named Jacob. This world was stylistically similar to the Manglewood we know of today, as it was sort of a swampy area, but Manglewood itself had an early version of its own, which leads directly into the next entry. The Tiki Paradise level kit was a repurposed early Manglewood. Manglewood at one point was going to have a Hawaiian theme, but all of that was scrapped and supposedly repurposed later on for the Tiki Paradise level kit released as downloadable content. This actually holds true. I'm not sure if everything was repurposed or if some of the stuff was new content. I just know that there was a Tiki background in LBP3's alpha, and it looks identical to the one seen in Tiki Paradise. LBP Vita was an intended LBP2 port. This is largely a series of educated guesses based on file names, early LBP Vita footage, and so much more. Firstly, if you take a look at the E3 2011 reveal trailer, you'll notice a lot of similarities between Vita and LBP2. It's almost as if LBP Vita was running on a PS3 at the time. Certain LBP2 themes, such as Avalonia and Factory of a Better Tomorrow, are referred to in the Vita file. One last piece of circumstantial evidence is that Vita is able to run and play LBP1 levels much like 2. Parappa the Rapper costume. In PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, a Parappa the Rapper costume shows up in Sackboy's Level 1 Super. This costume was never seen in a LittleBigPlanet game, but in the LBP3 remap file, there are some remnants of its code. The main question is, where did Superbot, the developers of PlayStation All-Stars, even get the idea of a Parappa costume? Did Superbot make it themselves? Are the files in the LBP3 remap related at all? Pod Bus. This was an unused pod used in early versions of LBP3. It was wider than the normal pod, had one more layer, and was based off a bus. It's fully functional in the LBP3 alpha, and you can enable something called Clubhouse Pod in the debug settings, which is essentially a restricted create mode in your pod. Not entirely sure why this was replaced by the same boring old pod from LBP1, but I really like the idea of it. Spawn Pop Cancer. This was a glitch in the mainline LBP games where you would constantly spawn and die over and over again. I'm not entirely sure what causes spawn pop cancer. I've never experienced it myself, but it seems unfixable, and the only solution is to delete your save file, much like profile corruption. Stitch'em Green. As many of you may know, most of the chapters in LittleBigPlanet 3's adventure mode had little hub areas with shops, contraption challenges, and collectibles to find. In the retail release of LBP3, the prologue was the only chapter in adventure mode without a hub world. This wasn't always the case, however, as during early development, a hub existed for the prologue called Stitch'em Green. Videos exist of this early Stitch'em Green hub world in action. LBP Karting mobile game. This technically has some truth to it, but don't get too excited, as all this really was a LBP Karting themed minigame in a mobile game called PlayStation All-Stars Island. This whole game was a Coca-Cola Zero promotion, so there was a lot of random Coke advertisements placed within the minigames themselves, and in the LBPK minigame, there are Coke point bubbles to collect, and Coke Zero flags are plastered all over the place. Early LBP3 pod music. In the alpha for LBP3, the pod music was much more upbeat compared to the one used in the final game, and at one point, the song was supposedly lost, as Mark Hall, a level designer from Sumo Digital, stated that the early pod music was overwritten by the new one. But in late 2016, a prototype of LBP3's alpha surfaced containing the lost pod music. Fun fact, there was actually a piece of this pod music heard in the background of an interview at E3 2014, but Mark Hall's tweet in 2016 is probably what originally sparked this search. Removed Monster Kit blood. In version 1.13 of LittleBigPlanet 1, the Monster Kit had a few changes, specifically ones that removed any hints of blood. The Party Ghouls music track icon was changed from red to green, and the vampire costumes had blood removed from their mouths. It's obvious why this change was made, probably to keep the game's age rating at E for everyone, but having hints of blood to begin with is a little strange for a game like this. Ice Cream Truck Sticker. There are a fair amount of unused stickers in LittleBigPlanet, and I'm not entirely sure if having all of them on the Iceberg would be a good idea, but this ice cream truck sticker in particular has some significance to it, I guess. It went unused in the retail release of LBP1, but it shows up in the LBP1 demo. The same demo you can just download on the PSN store. It was also later used as an LBP2 pin icon and even a collectible sticker in the Run Sackboy Run mobile game. Sackboy: A Big Adventure reuses concepts from LBP3's development. It's not crazy to think that certain concepts and ideas previously scrapped from LBP3 would be reused in the upcoming Sackboy: A Big Adventure, considering they're both games made by the developer, Sumo Digital, especially when so many things from the LBP3 builds and concepts have a strong resemblance to some of the recent Sackboy stuff showcased in trailers. The umbrella power-up seen in Sackboy: A Big Adventure is most definitely based off of LBP3's scrapped umbrella. The boomerang power-up in Sackboy: A Big Adventure could possibly be inspired by the boomerang model found in LBP3's files, and Floral Reef, an LBP3 adventure chapter that was never realized, looks oddly similar to the ocean world seen in Sackboy: Big Adventure trailers. The pod is a level. You might have realized that the pod isn't all too separated from the rest of the game's mechanics. For example, if you were to constantly move left and right, you'd notice the pod actually shakes, as if its physics work the same exact way as any other object in any other level. Going even further, if you were to abuse the create and pod glitch I mentioned earlier, you can in fact break the pod off of its string. The fact that it's even attached to a string at all implies that the pod itself is an object. All of this adds up to the idea of the pod taking place in an actual level this entire time. Obviously, it would be more of a custom-made, highly modified level, but still, it's a level nonetheless. Unused Team Pick Rosette and Rare Prize Director's Cap. These two pieces of DLC never really came out in the way they were intended. However, as of right now, you can actually download them for free on the European PlayStation Store, only if your region is set to Hungary. Nobody really knows why these costumes are available in that specific region, but my guess is that it was a mistake, and Sony doesn't actually know about it right now. The Team Pick Rosette is the exact decoration used for the Team Pick levels, and this was probably going to be given out to people that got their level team picked. As for the Rare Prize Director's Cap, well, this seems to be part of a collaboration with Machinima. The reason we know it's related to Machinima is because of a single string of code that mentions them in the Director's Cap mesh files. Dimensional doorways. At the end of LBP3, Sackboy and friends walk through a portal called a dimensional doorway in order to be transported back to Craftworld. Coincidentally, or possibly intentionally, a set of minigames were being worked on in the early stages of LBP3's development called the Dimensional Doorways, and each of them involved using a portal to warp to new sections of the level. Some believe that there was once a plan for a 5th bonus chapter in LBP3's story mode with those scrapped minigames. There was also an unused background icon related to Dimensional Doorways found in the final game's files. When trying to use the background in-game, it just brings up a broken version of Manglewood. Sackboy Mashup Pack on Xbox 360. This refers to an icon of the Sackboy Mashup Pack previously exclusive to PS3, appearing in the files of Minecraft Xbox 360 Edition. It's odd because Microsoft and Sony, especially during this generation, had no interest in working together on any sort of collaboration. To be fair, they are direct competitors, but having this icon appear in the Xbox version's files indicates that they were planning on doing this at one point. They were planning for the Sackboy Pack to come to Xbox. It could just be a test, a leftover from the PS3 version, or something else entirely, but nobody really knows. LBP2 Clans and Play Rank. Before LittleBigPlanet 2 went into production, a concept video of the game's pod menu was made, and in it are a few interesting features that never came to fruition. One of these features was Clans, and Clans was supposedly going to be a shared Earth between multiple users. Another feature was Play Rank, and if I were to guess, Media Molecule probably reused this idea for Dreams, as that game also has a Play Rank type leveling system. Communism Allegory. In LBP2 story mode, Factory of a Better Tomorrow has plenty of communist symbolism. The word comrades is used, there's fists, red stars, and a sackbot uprising. This is something I noticed while playing through story mode, but I never thought too much of it. It is a bit out of place considering the type of game LittleBigPlanet is, but I gotta say, it made the story mode a lot more memorable. Japanese server shutdown. In 2016, there was word going around that the online servers for LBP in Japan would be shut down. This is technically true, but it wasn't exactly the servers that shut down. See, LittleBigPlanet mostly relies on a peer-to-peer connection, while all of the levels are hosted on a server somewhere in Britain. So when the Japanese servers supposedly went offline, what had actually happened was, for some reason, a string of code was modified that just disabled Japanese consoles from connecting to the online servers. There seems to be no official statement for why this was done, but people have speculated that the translation team was no longer interested in keeping up with future updates. It could also just be due to poor sales of the series in Japan, but again, that's not much of a reason to simply disable the connection. I'm almost certain this didn't save Sony much money, but they did it anyways. There was some talk about whether or not this will affect other places outside of Japan shortly after its announcement, but Steven Isbell, the community manager, confirmed that the mainline series, as well as LBP Vita, will remain having the servers online for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, as some LittleBigPlanet spin-offs such as LBP PSP and LBP Karting's online servers did actually shut down outside of Japan around the same time. But I'm not entirely sure if those shutdowns were related to the Japanese shutdown at all. PS3 user. When you use a guest account on a second controller in LBP2, that controller will sometimes be given the user just called the PS3. What's odd is that the PS3 is an actual user and you could access its profile in-game by searching it up. What's even stranger is that every person that has used the PS3 user and has uploaded a screenshot has those screenshots show up on the actual PS3 profile. This is seemingly intentional, but it's not confirmed whether or not the account was made by Sony themselves. On a similar note, both Sony and Sackboy, all lowercase, are profiles you can search for in-game. The latter having a fair amount of hearts. LBP1 Arcade DLC. At first, there was going to be a big expansion to the first LittleBigPlanet game titled Arcade DLC. This DLC would have added logic, a custom gun, and many other things. By comparing these to some of the tools seen in LBP2, it's safe to assume that the Arcade DLC turned into LBP2. The custom gun became the Creatinator, an early version of Sackbots were planned, and early Cosmos background were possibly hinted at in this DLC. Now, LittleBigPlanet 1 also had references to LBP2 logic in the code, which adds up as the Arcade DLC supposedly added more logic. Coat hanger in the pod background. In early footage of LBP1, what seemed like a coat hanger was spotted in the pod background. But just recently, it was ported back to LBP1, thanks to the same dev kit that brought us the English Seaside files and Evel Knievel textures. InfoFridge/Cork Planet. A piece of LBP1 concept art shows a precursor to the Info Moon called the Info Fridge. It looked just to be concept art, but references to an Info Fridge were found in the LittleBigPlanet retail files. But that's not all, because there was once another Info Moon precursor called the Cork Planet. An early screenshot shows off this Cork Planet, and it's referenced in the LBP files as well. The Max Marshall LBP3 build. Max Marshall was a person that worked on LBP3 during early development. His concept art had a very different style compared to the LBP we know, and his work looked more like finished in-game assets rather than concept art. One piece of concept art that stands out in particular is one that has what seems like moons with tree houses on them. These have been dubbed lunar tree houses by some people in the community, and nobody really knows what these were about. LBP Hub became LBP3. Now, we all know the free-to-play LBP game, Hub, was most likely quietly canned, but some people think there's more to it than just a simple cancellation. There is evidence that LBP Hub slowly turned into LBP3. As features originally promised for Hub, was brought over to 3 over time. The DLC store in 3 was seemingly just lifted from Hub. The Seaside Surprise Kit for 3 was originally planned for Hub, and the Challenges planet in 3 uses a render from the Hub trailer, and Challenges just so happen to be a main focus for Hub. Not to mention, there are some costumes shown in the LBP Hub trailer that just came over to LBP 3. Sure, after hearing all of this, I wouldn't be surprised if Hub became 3, but I wonder, were these two games always planned to coexist with each other? Did they think LBP Hub was just more and more pointless the more they worked on LBP 3, and that's why they cancelled it? I really do want to know more about this game, and I would love to make a video on it one day. The other elusive unused LBP 1 backgrounds. There were a lot of unused backgrounds in LittleBigPlanet 1, and I know I talked about English Seaside earlier, but that one is much higher on the Iceberg because we have a lot of information on it. As for these other ones, the only reason why we know they exist is due to simple strings of code from early prototypes, concept art, or very low quality screenshots. These backgrounds include Russian Theater, which had a circus theme to it, Akihabara District, which had some relation to Japan and potentially kaiju monsters, Midwestern Train, which was supposedly on a train, who would have guessed, and most interesting is both a scrapped Final Fantasy VII Midgar theme and a scrapped Metal Gear Solid Shadow Moses theme. Midgar and Shadow Moses have early screenshots on Media Molecule's website, but as for the others, all we have are concepts or very scuffed screenshots grabbed from who knows where. Midwestern Train, Midgar, Akihabara, Russian Theater, and even more themes that weren't even mentioned have references in the LittleBigPlanet 3 remap file. Midwestern Train and Russian Theater both have ambience in the LBP1 files, as well as music tracks that were sold in the MM Music Pack, just like Tea by the Sea from English Seaside. There are more unused themes, but even less is known about them, and honestly, I don't want to talk about scrapped themes all day. There's a lot to cover still. I do plan on making a more comprehensive video on all of the unused LBP content, but right now, it's time to go deeper in the iceberg. Mezamashi TV Gardens level. An event in Japan featured a promotional version of a Gardens level in LBP1. This could be somewhat inaccurate due to a rough translation, but an article stated that visitors that played this level were awarded with exclusive LittleBigPlanet themed goods. I couldn't find anything about these goods, but since they are seemingly LittleBigPlanet related as well as exclusive to this event, I would like to find them one day. This event was located at Fuji TV headquarters. The mascot from Mezamashi TV, a Japanese morning broadcast program, can be found as a character and sticker in the level. Go 8-bit themed version of Think and Sync. Similar to the Mezamashi TV Gardens level, a special version of the co-op level, Think and Sync from LittleBigPlanet 3's The Journey Home DLC, appears in Season 1, Episode 2 of Dara O'Brien's Go 8-Bit, which was a British comedy game show. Two teams were tasked with completing a themed version of the level before the other team. Each player was in charge of different inputs. Two contestants were in charge of moving and changing states, and another two contestants were responsible for grabbing and jumping. Two versions of the Go 8-Bit altered levels were created, though the only difference between them appears to be the costume worn by the Togglebot based on one team member from each team. Probably to make it more suitable for television, the Go 8-Bit level was significantly shorter compared to the original. Nearly everything past the first Velociporter was cut. The race gates, the score bubbles, and the prize bubbles were all removed, while various background elements were either dropped entirely or replaced with picture frames containing stickers based on the show. LittleBigPlanet PSP was being developed before LBP1's release. LittleBigPlanet for the PS3 launched in 2008, but a PSP version was released a year later in 2009. Code suggests, however, that the PSP version was being worked on long before LBP1's release. The biggest evidence for this is that some PSP exclusive costumes were found in the PS3 version's pre-release builds. The crown cosmetic seen in PSP was actually a prototype for the rare prize crown seen in LBP1 and future games. LBP1 Alternate Universe soundtrack. Now, I can't play any of these songs, but apparently the composer for some of the music in LittleBigPlanet 1, Kenny Young, made a playlist on both YouTube and Spotify of music that was considered for LittleBigPlanet 1, all of which didn't make the cut. Kenny Young has dubbed this the Alternate Universe soundtrack. And if you want to listen to all of these songs, I'll put the links in the description below. But yeah, it's interesting to know that so many songs were considered but never made it into the final game. It's crazy too, because a lot of these feel like LBP songs. They feel right at home with the other songs. Milestone 5 build. This refers to an early to mid 2006 build of LittleBigPlanet 1 where a lot of features were drastically different or cut from the retail release. The name Milestone 5 refers to the video file name seen on camera footage of this early build. And I'm not like an expert in this or anything, but from what I understand, milestone is a term companies like Microsoft use for labeling each development stage. Judging by some of the Milestone 5 footage, LBP1 could have had support for up to 8 players instead of 4. Early power-ups such as the hair dryer, paint roller, paint scrapper, and shotgun were made equipable just by using certain controller inputs. Sponge balls were a completely unique mechanic that would be later replaced by bubbles. An early version of Sackboy, known as Craftling, had a hand that bobbed up and down, and the Poppet, along with other UI elements, were very different, and the game as a whole honestly looked a lot more three-dimensional compared to the final game. Sadly, high-quality footage of the Milestone 5 build or any other Milestone builds hasn't surfaced online, but just recently a screenshot of a Milestone build with the Katamari costume was found on that same dev kit that brought us English Seaside, so that's cool. But to be honest, this build alone could warrant an entire video. Rick Mal's Newton in the Burning Town ambience. Rick Mal was the original voice actor for LittleBigPlanet 3's main antagonist, Newton. Unfortunately, he passed away just days before the game's reveal on June 9th, 2014, so for the final game, Hugh Laurie stepped in to voice the character. Since Rick Mal was intended to be the final voice actor, some voice lines were already recorded, but obviously they went unused due to his death. However, cut together pieces of Rick Mal's voice lines can still be heard in the Burning Town ambience sound effect.
And now, the best as I am!
It is a nice way to honor the guy, but at the same time, it's also a bit unsettling. It's also not known if this was intentional or not. If not, that's kind of even more creepier. Killing the Poppet Professor. This refers to killing Larry da Vinci in LittleBigPlanet 3's Poppet Puzzle mode. In the private beta, as well as other early versions of LBP3, you were actually able to kill the Poppet Professor Larry da Vinci. Once you kill him and make it so that he doesn't respawn, the screen will fade to white and you'll see a cutscene. In this cutscene, Larry da Vinci's ghost will appear on screen, even sporting wings and a halo. There's a screen constantly telling you to rewind in order to bring him back to life. Unfortunately, this is almost impossible to achieve in the retail version of LBP3 due to various changes, but over the years, people found out that very specific Poppet puzzles can achieve a similar result. Both Larry da Vinci and Victoria even had scrapped voice lines that were probably going to be used for this ghost Easter egg, but never were, even in the private beta.
Oh, well now, how frightfully rude. Let's try not to let that happen again, eh?
Flattened like a poorly timed souffle.
LittleBigPlanet SAC app /LBP AR. Around LBP Vita's launch, Sony partnered with the company Zappar to make a LittleBigPlanet augmented reality smartphone app called SAC app. The app had you point your smartphone camera to the LBP Vita's box art, and when you did, it turned into a Dino Run-esque score-based minigame. On Zappar's Vimeo page, they mentioned something about winning DLC prizes, and I've looked everywhere, but I can't find what DLC they're specifically talking about. Were they even given outs? Besides that, it is a strange little app, and in a way, it's kind of like a precursor to Run Sackboy Run, although that game was much different and much more fleshed out. LittleBigPlanet's Education Edition. In March of 2011, Sony started an initiative to get LBP into schools with a special teacher kit that had exclusive levels that used the PS Move controller. From what I understand, this never actually went into effect, and nobody knows if the teacher kit content would have ever been sold on the PlayStation Store for retail copies. It's a strange little LBP tidbit, lost to time, but we know it existed thanks to this Eurogamer article. The Ant Mesh. In palette_creatures.bin, an unused LBP1 level made for testing NPCs, there are two creatures shown that are notable. One is the infamous Walker enemy, and second is this ant creature. Its mesh has movable limbs, and no logic is attached to it. I don't think this was actually going to be an enemy in game, as it did seem like a test for movable limbs and whatnot, but yeah, just like the Walker, it was another test. Eye Bleeding Bull. LittleBigPlanet Karting had something very strange in one of its unused test levels. After finishing the race, a skull of a bull with blood pouring out of its eyes is shown for a few seconds. There's no music playing, there's no sound, it's just a silent cutscene, probably made to test, well, the cutscenes. It's creepy, sure, but at the same time I can't help but find it somewhat amusing. LBP Karting was originally Mod Nation 2. There is actually some evidence pointing towards LBPK originally being a Mod Nation Racers sequel, and I mean more evidence than just the two being made by the same developers. A track studio and unused icons for what was a Mod Nation Racer cards were found in the files. Of course, there were two Mod Nation Racer games after the first one for PSP and one for PS Vita, but LBPK was most likely going to be a full-fledged console sequel to the first game, until Sony told the developers to make it LittleBigPlanet themed in order to drive more sales. Long story short, Mod Nation Racers died. Scrapped Disney DLC. There was originally going to be a Winnie the Pooh, Mickey Mouse and Friends, Wall-E, and Steamboat Willie costume pack. Remnants of the costume files were found in the remap file for LBP3 PS4, but these can't be fully recovered as only references were left over. The reason why these are so far down on the iceberg compared to other scrapped DLC is because these are some of the most least known about DLCs. I've heard that a few of these, such as Steamboat Willie and Mickey Mouse and Friends, were pitched during LBP1's life cycle. There's even early concept art for Mickey Mouse, but it was also supposedly pitched again in LBP3 under the Disney Classics pack. Every user creation is canon to the franchise. This sounds like one of those meme entries typically found near the bottom of these icebergs, but if you think about it, it isn't all too hard to believe. Every object, costume, level, screenshot, anything you or anyone else has ever made in LittleBigPlanet is uploaded to the server and universally connected to every other aspect of the game. LittleBigPlanet's whole premise is create, play, and share, so if any game were to have canon user creations, it would be LBP. LBP Karting for PS Vita. This is by far probably the least likely to actually exist, but there are three small pieces of evidence that might go towards a Vita version of karting actually existing at one point. In 2012, Gamefly, of all people, stated that LittleBigPlanet Karting will be releasing on the PlayStation Vita alongside the PS3 version. Sony outright denied this, however, and said Gamefly was just incorrect. It would only be launching on PS3, and that's that. 2 years later, though, a listing on the PlayStation Store for LittleBigPlanet Karting Vita was found, but it seemed to have just been once again another mistake. The only other thing that could possibly go in favor of this rumor was that multiple people said they once saw a LittleBigPlanet Karting commercial for PS Vita. The only reasonable explanation is that these people might have seen an LBP Vita commercial, and since both LBPK and LBP Vita were coming out around the same time, it's very likely people got them mixed up. Location of Sackboy spacesuit plush after Project Near Space. Sony actually sent a Sackboy plush into space in 2012. Well, near space. They simply called it Project Near Space, and it was made into a video on the PlayStation Australia YouTube channel. At the end of the video, the plush is seen landing back on Earth, but the location of this plush nowadays is unknown. And what I mean is not the location of it at the end of the video. We do see it drop down, they do pick up the Sackboy, he is recovered, but we don't know where it is today. I don't believe the spacesuit Sackboy plush was ever sold in stores, seems to be one of a kind, and nobody knows of its whereabouts. If I were to guess though, it's probably somewhere in Media Molecule's office. I can't accept that though. We need to find him. We need to start a movement. Spacesuit Sackboy needs our help. Cyclops. An absolutely horrifying, gigantic Cyclops character was seen in early LBP1 milestone footage. We know almost nothing about this strange character other than the fact that it was probably going to be a boss, and that comes from some remnants found in the LBP3 remap file. Finally, there is a concept sketch of the Cyclops out there, and it looks pretty much identical to the Cyclops seen in that early footage. LittleBigPlanet Star Wars. Around 2011, some type of Star Wars content for LittleBigPlanet was being worked on. Besides some concept art that might be unrelated, the only reason we know about this is from a freelance designer that worked on LBP around this time. This person, who shall remain anonymous, stated this in an email.
I worked on LBP3 from 2011 till late 2012. I started fairly on in the development, though the project had started life as an LBP Star Wars as I recall, but midway through the year they went through a major art redesign, and when I left the project they were going through another. I worked on a lot of characters and quite a few prop assets. I have no idea if any of the stuff was used in the final game. They had done some modelling on the Star Wars LBP as I saw the Sackboy style C-3PO character.
Now this is just from memory of this freelance designer. It seems like they weren't really involved a whole lot. They don't really remember a lot of things. They don't remember if a lot of this stuff actually got into the game or not. But considering this person said 2011 to 2012, this could have possibly been scrapped LBP2 DLC. Sure, that makes the most sense. But since LBP3 was mentioned, LittleBigPlanet Star Wars could have been an entirely separate game, a sequel to LBP2. That would be really cool to find out about. Bloody Man Object. This unsettling object was found in a cached cluster of developer profiles located in a PS3 test console that had remnants of an early LBP1 build. What makes the Bloody Man particularly creepy, besides the blood, is the lack of information we will ever get from it, because the files that reference the Bloody Man appear to be gone. Nobody knows why this guy was here, what he would have been used for, and all we have is just this simple image of him. It's horrifying. Needlepoint Peaks underwent climate change. Needlepoint Peaks, the first level of LBP3's adventure mode, used to have a different look in the pre-beta. The level was a lot more snowier. There's a theory that Needlepoint went through climate change over time and turned into the grassy and vibrant Needlepoint Peaks we know of today. Lost LittleBigPlanet Flash Game. There was an official LBP Flash game called LittleBigPlanet Generator made before LBP1 even released, and it's lost media. The only proof of its existence is a YouTube video by CMP175 that shows off the game in its full glory. There's not really a lot to say about Sackboy Generator other than it being a game where you customize your Sackboy, but if it's ever found, you bet I'll make an entirely separate video on it. I know it's just a simple Flash game and tons of Flash games are considered lost media, but LittleBigPlanet is my favorite franchise of all time, so I would like to see this found one day. Speaking of which, there just so happens to be yet another lost Sackboy Generator game. It's called LittleBigPlanet 2 Sackboy Generator, and this one doesn't look nearly as interesting, but it's still lost, and from what I understand, this little game was seemingly made for a contest to win either a PS3, a Sony Bravia TV, or a Sackboy toy. Yeah, that's all we really know about these two games. I'm more so interested in LittleBigPlanet 1 Generator, but finding more info on the second one would be cool too. Wow, that was probably my most ambitious video ever made. I would like to give a huge thanks to the people that helped out with this project. This video would have been a lot less interesting if it wasn't for them. The people that provided footage, information, and especially the people that made this iceberg even happen. The iceberg itself was a collaborative effort between Chunkinator 104, Aucratic, MysteriousCube, and me to some extent. But I also took some things from an LBP iceberg I saw on Reddit, so thanks to that person too. I've learned so many things about this series in the past 4 weeks. There is still a lot of stuff to talk about regarding obscure LBP stuff, but I'm probably going to make either separate videos focusing on certain things, and maybe a second part of this iceberg video. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys very soon with another video. But goodbye!